This is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage
I'm Nancy Richards, and it's hot out
with Guillermo.
with Guillermo being Guillermo. Guillermo got a haircut,
He did. He
so
looks nice and he looks nice and groomed. Your internet is kind of acting up, so you're I can hear you, but the visual is kind of slow to catch up.
oh, okay.
So
Um,
it's
well,
fine.
I have the mic on, but I've been having trouble all day with the internet and my computer, as you know. The power
Same
went off
actually.
on the, but like so, it's again. Andrew, this might die again because now it's still red, even though like the charger sign is on it.
Hmm.
So I don't get it. Like, and that's what happened when I was online with you before, and the it died, and then I came and plugged it in, and then it even though like it's showing that it's charging, it's not enough to keep it going, which is weird. I don't know what's happening. So
Well, we'll make do with
um
what we got.
okay, so we'll see what happens. So we you might lose me, folks. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, we have interesting things to talk about on Staten Island. We've covered the um, Congressional District 11 primary ad nauseum. As we know, last week, Mike DeSillis officially became the nominee, the Democratic nominee for Congressional District 11. And as of yesterday, the Democratic County Committee of Richmond County finally endorsed Mike DeSillis.
Yay.
And it was a joint statement between the chairman of the party, Assemblyman Charles Fall, and the DeSillis campaign. And it was kind of I'm not going to read it, but it was kind of a kumbaya statement about, how we have to unite behind the nominee and all that stuff. And as I said last week, I expect in a rally, usually those happen like in the beginning of August. It's kind of the unofficial start to the campaign season right before Labor Day begins. And so I think that'll be when we kind of get the visual of all that.
Well, good. I'm glad it happened. And now let's go beat Nicole. So,
Yes,
and we don't have to
absolutely.
harp on this sorry issue.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because there's already been kind of some back and forth between Mike and Nicole in the media because this month, actually, maybe today or tomorrow, I don't remember which, but it's the 1 year anniversary of the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill. And the big beautiful bill is what is going to uh, cost 500,000 New Yorkers their health insurance. And Nicole Maliotakis voted enthusiastically for that and continues to this day to say that, it's wonderful and beneficial for the community because of tax cuts and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, she insists that this bill helps working New Yorkers, especially seniors, waitress, people in the service industry. Um, when if there is, I hadn't noticed any changes at all, and I'm someone who collects Social Security. So
No,
I don't know where this big change is. Fortunately, you and I work for the city, so we have good health care. So we're not impacted, though they do try to go after retirees. They're trying to kind of cheapen our coverage, and we're fighting no. So,
absolutely. And
but
and she Yeah, well, and Nicole does what she always does, which is basically to pee on our legs and tell us it's raining.
yeah.
And
Her
uh,
theme song should be "You Spin Me Round, Round, Baby, Right Round," because that's all she does is spin.
that is all she does is spin. And Mike actually held a press conference yesterday, just to talk about the rising costs and to remind voters that Nicole Maliotakis did vote for this bill and has continued to exalt it and to uh, credit all of the imaginary benefits that she claims will go to her constituents. And it was interesting because she said in response to Mike's criticism, she said, well, I'm glad that Mike DeSillis is telling voters he wouldn't have voted for tax cuts for working families. And so again, it's just more gaslighting, it's just more BS, it's more spin for the Trump administration. And she is splitting hairs because her argument was, well, New York State decided to restrict health insurance. Well, New York State decided to be more restrictive about who they cover because the lack of federal funding has forced them into that position. And
Yeah,
so
it's called
she,
a cut,
yeah.
you know.
And so she splits hairs like that. And to try and deliberately confuse people, to try and deliberately mislead them about what is actually happening and who caused it. Nicole Maliotakis, let's be clear, voted for a bill that cuts the health care of her constituents, period, end of story, along with the rest of the Republican delegation in New York State, which the governor pointed out in her social media post yesterday.
Yeah, Mike Lawler, who, comes out like, oh, I'm the, quintessential middle of the road guy, moderate, and voted for it as well.
Well, they know what happens if they don't. I mean, Trump was campaigning with Mike Lawler very recently, and uh, and so they know that if they speak critically or ask a question or point out something that may be flawed about their bill, to put it mildly, then they know that they will lose the president's support. They know that they'll lose all of the campaign funding associated with that, and potentially even a primary challenger. And so so Nicole, does the little dance, and she does the dance and she spins and she lies constantly to her constituents and misleads them about what her actual record is and what it's done to the people in her district.
Well, she's going to have a tough campaign because Mike has a good ability. He knows his shit, and he can call her on what she says with information and factual, as opposed to something broad and, like what she does, spin the information. But he can actually come back with real facts and figures, and she's going to give her a run for her money. And then also, she can't like. I was somebody posted a Nicole's, kick off the campaign, and it was in Staten Island Neighbors, and someone was like, oh, well, and I'd rather have Nicole instead of like, a cop hating candidate. And so somebody was like, Mike DeSillis was a former police officer. So,
Yeah.
and like, shut the guy down. And then they said, and Max Rose is not running this campaign. So just the lack of like that type of misinformation
Well,
just
and
needs to be.
that's the kind of misinformation that people like Nicole prey on. They count on people being misinformed. They count on people being apathetic. They count on people not asking the hard questions. And I hope that this campaign uh, does that for her because she has a lot to answer to. She has a lot to explain to her constituents. She's not held a single town hall in 15 years of elected office at both the state and federal level. She has voted for bills that constantly drive up our costs and make our lives worse and take away our rights. And so she really needs to answer for all of that.
Yes. Do you think she'll have a town hall at all or a debate?
I think she'll debate. I think she will debate. I think the Staten Island Advance holds their forum with the candidates. There will be other civic associations that will hold their forums. And if she doesn't show up to those debates, I know in the last campaign, Andrea Morse showed up everywhere that she was asked to go to either speak or debate. And there, a good percentage of the time, Nicole didn't show up to those. And so and that shows that she's a coward. That shows that she's afraid, that she doesn't want to answer for her real record. And we have to just remind people of that. I think this time around, she'll probably show up to more because there's more pressure on her. We have these Maliotakis Mondays, we have the visibility brigades. The resistance on Staten Island is much more vocal than it's ever been. And so,
Right.
and so I think that she will have to respond to that in some way.
I think Mike does a really good job at getting his message out, and I really think it's important that he has the ability to get his message out to more people, meaning I'm glad that the Democratic Party has endorsed him now. So maybe there can be some funding or help him with fundraising. So more information about what he says and does to, Staten Islanders and, and Brooklyn, because he is the better candidate.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm hoping that, we can start off the general election season very strong. Instead of answering questions about her voting for this bill that cuts people's health care, Nicole Malliotakis showed up along with probably a dozen other people to Trump's, flop of a state fair in Washington, D.C. And of course, she had to go live on social media to make sure that, the mob boss knows that
How is that state,
there.
how is that state fair going? Because
Oh,
the
oh,
last reports I saw, it looked like a ghost town. Hold on, I'm closing my door.
yeah. Like I said, she was one of maybe a dozen other people to show up to this state fair, and there were actually some really fun quotes. Courier Newsroom, which is a social media page I follow regularly for news bites. It was funny. They some of the tweets about state fair. Right now, I just want to be alone. I think I'll go to the Great American State Fair. And that's from John Pavlovitz. He's a prolific Substacker and columnist and all that. If you're still into social distancing, you might want to check out the Great American State Fair.
I'm, I actually am disappointed that it's not working out because I really wanted some type of good celebration. It is a milestone, and I think Trump just makes it wah wah wah,
He kills
and
he kills the
I
vibe
think a state
wherever he
fair is a
goes.
good idea. Like it sounds like a good idea. Like every state comes and brings its contributions and, have it on, the National Mall and people can visit each state. I thought it was a relatively good idea. Like, and I felt it could be very nonpartisan as well, just kind of like
Um,
have the state decide what they want to contribute, as their you know, five best things or whatever. Um,
I don't think that exists in this time, and I don't know that blue states, including New York, would be eager to participate while he's doing everything he can to, fuck us over 3 ways from Sunday, no matter the issue. And so I don't know. I'm happy. I'm actually happy it's a flop. I'm happy that literally
well,
pieces of the stage were falling apart. They were falling
I'm
apart.
not I I'm not happy that it's a flop, because aside from who's in office, I think that there should be some celebration that we've lasted 200. There's a lot to celebrate about this country. Aside from the fact that, we have this horrible president and who's destroying it. Um, we should still celebrate. There's a lot of good things about the United States. And so I'm disappointed that it is a flop because I was hoping maybe there might be a good celebration, not to promote Donald Trump, but to promote the history of the United States. Unfortunately, because Donald Trump is president, he couldn't pull off a good celebration.
No, and people don't want to go to something that I think they associate with him and his brand. And so I think that's what's kept a lot of people away. And if you looked at some of the decor around the state fair, one of the things was a model of that Hitler arch that he wants to build. It
Yeah, I
was,
saw that.
yeah. And
I,
so and like everything else, he makes it about him, and that's it. And if you're, and it's, if you go there, you know, whether meaning to or not, it seems like, kind of a form of capitulation if you go and just kind of and do that and look at all the lame decorations and you know,
We should
be
have went and did it live from there.
well, we would be competing with Nicole because she was the only person, the more people were watching her probably on the live than were actually there. Like,
Really.
yeah,
So,
she
it,
was she was there. I saw the Ferris wheel or whatever it was behind her, and the comments were, I was there for the comments. It was amazing. All of the comments, they were like, "Oh, you and 10 and all 10 of you are there."
so well, um, well, New York is having a celebration. I'm interested in Mondami's doing a speech, and um, he planned it to do it before Donald Trump spoke, and he is having it at a historic site in New York City, and apparently he's going to address the issue of naturalized citizens and give some sort of speech. Apparently, it's going to be an important one. So I'm curious to see, and he specifically planned it so it would be before Donald Trump spoke. So I'm
Well,
curious as to what that's going to be.
yeah, well, I heard it was going to be, he was going to be at, I don't know if he's going to be sitting at the desk or near it. It's going to be at George Washington's desk in City Hall because for a time in our history, New York City was the capital of the United States before Washington, D.C. was established. And so
Right.
I think that's where he's going to be speaking. And he's had quite a big week because from I saw an Axios report out earlier today that, or maybe it was yesterday, that Kamala Harris had reached out to Mamdani. And it was largely seen by Mamdani's people, but also people within the left as kind of a way to mend fences between her camp and particularly the pro-Palestinian camp, because that was the focus of their conversation. And so she said, on her end, supposedly, she said that it was just the beginning of a much longer conversation. I'm not sure
Very
what,
good.
yeah, I'm not sure what that means. And it's clearly, the strongest indicator that she is planning a 2028 run. And why else would she want to, make this kind of move?
Well, that is a conversation, a difficult conversation that the Democratic Party needs to have in regards to its position with Palestinians and with Israel. They have to come up with a position, and I know that because we're under a large umbrella, it might be hard to actually do that. But the progress is if the different sides within the party can have a meaningful conversation about how they see this.
Yeah, well, I think, the big square she's going to have to circle with that wing of the party is, I think there's still some animosity about the fact that at the 2024 convention, there was a pro-Palestinian speaker and they were not allowed onto the stage. And so there was a lot of animosity built there. Um, I think this was also she's also met not just with Mandani, but with the founder of the Uncommitted movement. The Uncommitted movement was actually before she was even on the ballot when Joe Biden was still ostensibly the nominee. And to try and mend fences there, she's kind of working the phone to, see if there's a way to bridge the gap and maybe, bring some of those people into the fold, or potentially there's some detente involved.
Well, that they have to, because that is a big part now of this party, the issue of Palestinians. And honestly, I think we're going to lose some uh, people on the issue of Israel to the Republican Party, which we have already. I know a lot of people who it's like Israel my way or the highway have, now support Donald Trump. Um, and I don't think we should be courting those people anymore. I really don't. Um, because they're going to go over to the Republican side anyway. Because the Republicans, because Donald Trump is courting that. Um, I think in New York City has a very, largest Jewish population in the country. But there's a lot of Jewish people in this city who believe in the state of Israel, but also believe in the rights of Palestinians. And what happened in Gaza was, you know, was horrible. In addition to what happened, October, what happened, you know, in Israel. So uh, the Democrats have to openly talk about that.
I hope so. Well, I think the main policy sticking points that they're going to hold, not just Kamala Harris, but I think anybody who runs for the nomination in 28 is whether they commit to not sending any weapons at all to Israel, or funding or resources. I think that's going to be a real sticking point, policy-wide.
Well, I don't think there should be a blank check anymore. There definitely shouldn't be a blank check.
No, well, there's actually, there's some variations of that, just kind of across the prospective field of Democratic candidates. Like there are some who would say, I am Jack Schlossberg when he was running for New York 12 took a lot of shit for this, but he said that he would continue to support defensive spending on the Iron Dome, and that got him a lot of shit online for it. But so there's a spectrum there. So some people are talking about conditioning aid. Some people are saying don't have any aid at all to Israel. Some people are saying just only defensive, not offensive. And so I think that wing of the party, though, I think is not going to accept any variation except don't send anything at all.
Maybe, but maybe not. I think I think when people have demands in their party platform, they have demands, but then when they get into elected office, they have to work with others. And I think from that point, they will bring their position, but and they should. They should bring their position, but they're going to have to work within, the within the system. And so that's going to involve some sort of compromise. Just going to have to. Uh, and then those who are outside of the elected sphere will push their candidates to make those. That's what always happens. So I expect that.
Oh, I do too. And, and I think the reason that Kamala Harris felt as though she had to reach out to Mamdani and to reach out to that wing of the party is because they have continued to have significant victories over the last week or so. So we know about the New York wins here in New York City, the three Mamdani endorsed candidates here in New York City won, but there was also primary a couple of nights ago out in Denver, Colorado. Diana DeGette, who was the longtime congresswoman, 30 years, that congresswoman in that area. She lost her reelection to Malak Kiros, who is a
Do you know what
DSA.
part of Denver? Do you know what part of Denver she was?
I think it was all of Denver. I think it was all of Denver because anytime I've heard the people talk about it, it says, it's Denver, basically. They don't really make it just.
Do you know her district number?
I want to say District 1, I think. So I want to just check on that for a moment.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
just doing that now.
Colorado's first district, yes.
Okay. Um, so I'm just going to look at the map. Not that I'm an expert on Denver, but I have a few friends there, and there's parts of that Denver are extremely progressive liberal, like,
Oh yeah.
like Park Slope type of, um, and so I'm not surprised, even though I know you said that this young woman has been in Congress for a while, and you said she has a good record. So,
Yeah, Diana DeGette actually, well, she's been in Milak Kiros, who was the DSA back challenger. She made the point of saying, that Diana, because part of the issue in this race, there were two big issues. There was Israel, although I don't think Diana DeGette was that big a supporter of Israel. Um, that was one issue. But then also this one I felt like was a little different than the New York uh, congressional races in that this was more about generational change because Diana DeGette has been there for so long. She's been there since 1996, and Mila Kiros pointed out the fact that she's been in Congress since before I was born. That was when, because this woman, the girl who beat her, is young, and so she said she's been there for, a long time. And some people, I think, got the message, like here in New York City, Nydia Velasquez got the message from 2024 that, eventually it's time to go. Some people took a little
Yeah.
longer to recognize that, like Diana DeGette.
I'm looking at the district. It's gerrymandered. It's kind of looks it does spread out across it does a little bit of a zigzag in Denver. Because I was kind of looking to see like where if but I can't really see the streets. So if I saw a couple of the main streets, I could get an idea, but I can't. So um could be that, certain areas are a lot more progressive especially in downtown
Oh yeah, well they
where like Colfax.
Yeah, like I said, this one seemed, even though Israel came up, and I don't see APAC. I didn't see APAC spending much money on Diana to get the way that they did on Adriano Espaillat here in New York, for example. But this seemed to, like I said, this seemed to be more about generational change. People, and I listened to a focus group of Colorado voters from the Bulwark's focus group podcast, and a lot of the voters who would then vote that following Tuesday said, well, she's been there for a long time, and what do we have to show for it, essentially?
Yeah. And, I think not everyone, but I think a lot of Democratic voters are kind of said, you've been here for a while and I don't really have anything. Bye-bye. You're a nice person, but I'm going to go with this person now. Um, so change within, which
Yeah,
is, we'll see how that goes.
yeah. I like Diana DeGette. I think she's had some interesting positions that she's taken over the years. And I think that, one thing that I remember Diana DeGette for is that she was an outspoken opponent of, when she was running for Congress initially in her first term many years ago, she was an opponent of the so-called Defense of Marriage Act, which was signed by Bill Clinton of all people, which allowed states to ban gay marriage in up until Obergefell over, and the Windsor case overturned it. But that was not an easy thing to do at that time because she was a minority of members of Congress. Both parties voted for that bill, and she was an outspoken opponent running to say, we shouldn't do this.
Right. But when was Bill Clinton president?
Oh, I know. Well, he was president in the 90s, but like
Yeah.
I think that was always my thing is that she was pretty good on most issues.
But
Um,
what has she done for you lately?
for me, nothing because she's not my congresswoman, but
Exactly. But I mean, you said you liked her, but I'm saying
yeah,
in general, like what has she done for us lately? Nothing. So, she has had a good record in the past, but people are getting pushed out because they're not Democrats have lost a spine and they're not or if they haven't lost it, they're not using it. They're not using their backbone. And
I don't,
even though they're
I
the
don't
minority, they're not using it.
Well, I don't think one could say that about Diana DeGette. Diana DeGette was actually an impeachment manager of Donald Trump's, much like Adam Schiff was. I think she's been pretty good on most issues, but I think this is part of a generational uh, sea change in certain areas. I think this was, like I said, this is a little different from the what animated the New York races because I think this was more about generational change than any particular issue. Because she's Diana DeGette has been supportive of Israel, but not to the degree that, like I said, Adriano Espaillat was or Dan Goldman was. And so I think this was more about just kind of generational uh,
Well,
change.
you say that because she was on the committee to impeach Trump. what does that take? I mean, I would think any Democrats would be on that committee if given the opportunity.
Well, she was a prosecutor. She was the prosecutor. Like her role was what Adam Schiff's was in that first impeachment. She
Well,
was there.
is that her profession?
She's what, a prosecutor?
Yeah, is that what she did prior to being a congresswoman?
Um, Let me see.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, I'm assuming that's why
yeah.
they had her do it.
Yes, she is a lawyer. She
Oh,
she
okay.
she
All
is a
right.
she is a
Doing her
lawyer.
job.
But it's not easy to be, impeachment manager because you're essentially you have to make a case oftentimes to a politically unwilling audience in the Senate. And so I wouldn't say that she didn't have a backbone. I just think like so many others, she just didn't know when it was time like for her to go. I mean, Mitch McConnell is practically on his deathbed, still a sitting U.S. senator.
Yeah,
And
they're
so,
talking about that today. So I'm
yeah,
wondering how he's doing. So
yeah. So he's practically on his deathbed. We've seen, and she's not in that shape, thankfully. But I think um, this just kind of represents more of a sea change. And speaking of the uh, DSA winners here in New York, Brad Lander. I didn't know this, but Brad Lander, I was watching in follow-up interview he did after he won his primary, and he was a member of DSA, Brad Lambert, but he left actually. He left in 2023 over what he perceived to be anti-Semitic language in their platform regarding Israel and Palestine. He refers to himself as a liberal Zionist, but he's already kind of pissed off the DSA faithful because um, he has publicly vowed to support Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker of the
what do you think
House,
about that? Do you think
Democrat.
that's a good move that he does that?
Uh, I don't think he has anything to lose by doing that. I think that if you're going to withhold support from somebody who's going to be the leader of the majority party and eventually the Speaker of the House, I think there has to be a credible challenger. And thus far, there's not. I would really like to see Ro Khanna be a challenger to Hakeem Jeffries. And from what I hear, Ro Khanna
That's a good
is
idea. Yeah.
what I'm hearing is he's actually contemplating a presidential run himself, but I don't think that's the right lane for him. I think he would actually be a fabulous Speaker of the House because even in the minority, he has managed to get things through, uh, like the law compelling the Justice Department to release the Epstein files, among other things. He's managed to work around with all of these discharge petitions. And so he really knows the House very well. And I think he would be a really good challenger to Hakeem Jeffries if he decides to move down that path.
So do you think maybe Brad Ladner kind of jumped the gun a little too quick about supporting him? I
No,
mean,
I think that the New York delegation, for the most part, at least the Democrats, there's only one Republican, and of course she's here in Staten Island. But I think the New York City delegation will probably unify behind Hakeem Jeffries just because of uh, the local.
including the other two that won, that
I think eventually they'll be brought around. I think eventually they'll be
so
brought
then
around.
why would the DSA then be pissed?
Well, because they want it, they are hoping, my guess is that they're hoping that if enough people remain uncommitted to Jeffries, that maybe perhaps a challenger might emerge. But so far, I don't see that happening. Um,
I I would agree with the DSA on that. I would kind of hope that like you said, like someone like, like Roe to emerge as a challenge. I would kind of hope that by when we think about, and I don't know, I should take back what I said because I don't agree with how people treated Mondami, a lot of the Democrats, like Jeffries, how, he kind of, held back from supporting him for mayor, running for mayor when he won the primary. Um, my point, I'm just losing my point here, but I just think that they should just hold back a little bit and wait and see if there'll be a challenge. But
Yeah,
I also understand that if they're the New Yorkers, they should support their other New York,
I think
and
that's
he,
really what the conflict is. Not so much
they could be
politics, but
pissed.
that.
DSA is pissed that he didn't initially, support Mandami. So I could see why they would be pissed off.
Well, yeah, but I think they could have dealt with that by going ahead with their own primary challenge, which they had planned at the beginning of this year. But I think Mamdani was kind of smart enough to read the tea leaves to know that that wasn't going to work necessarily.
No, I
And
don't mean the primary. I don't mean giving primarying Jeffries. I'm talking about now,
no, I
supporting
know,
him.
but yeah, no, I think if they really wanted to go, the full Monty, I think they would have went ahead with that. They had somebody who was already an elected official who, potentially could be competitive with Jeffries
But
as
that,
far as fundraising
if that
and
kid
equipment.
primaried him, if that
Yeah.
kid primaried him and happened to win, he's too new to even think about being a
Oh
speaker.
yeah, no, no, no. He wouldn't have, he wouldn't have done that. So I think in that case, it probably would have been, gone to somebody else within the leadership, or potentially, somebody who is more in line with what they want, especially on Israel, because I think that's really the big issue that they are focused on as it relates to endorsing and to deciding whether or not they're going to primary.
That is a tough place to tackle. I know as a teacher, we had a PD where they brought the Midwood schools together to discuss how they were going to talk about, the Gaza issue in Israel, because of the population of the schools. And I mean, I was subbing, but I knew a lot of teachers at that PD, and pretty much they walked away and said, really, the only thing we learned from that PD is we still shouldn't talk about it because nobody wants to talk about it because it's such a
It's
controversial, yeah, issue.
it's
And that's
dicey.
unfortunate. Yeah. But that's
Well, and
unfortunate because, you know,
yeah, there's a lot, my thing is I've always defended anybody's right to be critical of Israel and not be accused of anti-Semitism, because
hmm
I don't believe that if you are critical of Israel, or if you call their actions a genocide, or you call into question the way that they treat Palestinians just on a regular basis, I don't believe that's anti-Semitic. Um,
no, neither do I.
I don't
But some
believe that,
people do. Some
yeah.
people do. I have friends who unfriended me on Facebook and don't talk to me anymore. And we didn't even have a debate or an argument over this issue. They just, I guess, assumed my where I stood because I had a Left in the Forgotten podcast. And I actually have a former administrator who I love and admire greatly. And we're on opposite ends of this. And I'm surprised sometimes at, the comments, but we have to be able to talk about this. But some people, they're very hard lines in how they see this. And they have very strong feelings. And it's unfortunate that they closed the door.
Yeah, well, it's hard to talk about because it's so steeped in a number of real things that I think are just so, once people have decided where they are, they're just more entrenched. And so, for example, I think it's wrapped up in religion. I think it's wrapped up in culture. I think it's wrapped up in upbringing. And so those are things that are not easily swayed at all. And
Right.
I think people get very much entrenched because all of those things are wrapped up in it, and all of those things inform what they believe about it. And so, I will defend anybody's right to be critical of any country, Israel, ours, anybody's. And so I don't believe that that's necessarily anti-Semitic. I do have some issues as far as like some of the tactics are concerned, as far as the way that that's expressed. And Scott Wiener, who is a candidate running for Nancy Pelosi's seat in San Francisco. Now, the way they do it, just so our listeners aren't confused, because there's two Democrats in the race still, it's not a primary technically. Those are the way that they do it is whoever advances in the top two positions goes on to the general election. That's how they do it in California. So in that case, it was Scott Wiener and it was Connie Chan. Connie Chan has actually been endorsed by Nancy Pelosi to take that seat. And uh, what was interesting, Scott Wiener is this current state senator in California, and he was at a trans march for Pride because there was a whole lot of Pride celebrations taking place across the country last week, including here in New York City. And he was accosted and he was heckled about his position on Israel. And it was the thing that I object to, one, is that they were very close to him. They were standing very close. It was menacing. It wasn't a conversation. It was, we're just going to yell at you. And secondly, if you look at Scott Wiener's,
Asshole.
yeah, if you look at Scott Wiener's history on the issue of Israel, he has called the actions of the Israeli government a genocide. He has been critical of the Netanyahu government. He has said that he would condition aid to Israel. So these are positions that very much mirror what many of the activists on this side of the party are demanding from elected officials. So it was unclear to me why they would take that approach with him. But he was the one who actually said, this is anti-Semitic, and people were saying this is anti-Semitic, this is unacceptable. And especially because I think Connie Chan's position, Connie Chan's been endorsed, his opponent has been endorsed by Nancy Pelosi, who is an unapologetic supporter of Israel. And so they have not approached her in the same way. And so that is,
Was she at that rally? Was she
I
at
don't know.
that event? So she
I don't
probably
know. I
wasn't
mean,
there.
yeah,
She
well,
probably
no, I mean,
wasn't there.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, just generally, they haven't approached her in that way. And so a lot of people are left to conclude, is this an anti-Semitic thing? Did they assume because he's Jewish that he has a belief that is one that casts Israel as superior or as super Zionist or something like that? And so I object to those kind of tactics. I don't think that that moves the needle as far as the discussion is concerned. And so I'm really
No.
hoping that
But you
there's,
you you have those fringe people on both sides of that don't know how to behave, that are rude and entitled and feel that, the only position is what they have to say. And that goes for people on, the far right as well. Um,
well, the
and
far right
I know
is
just
answers the art.
being at, rallies that are predominantly all left, you have a fringe of people that are, you know, do you know who the Spartacist League is?
No,
They're- if you ever see any of the big banners at a lot of rallies, they're printed by the Spartacist League, and they're an ultra left organization, and they agree with nobody, but they're always at like worker rights rallies. They're always at, defending and um, critical of everyone. Um, but they do it in a manner that is not in people's face. You know what I mean? Like they have their newsletters, and if you read them, you're like, what the what? But they're always there, and they're always there, at anything that is of the left. But what I disagree with, and it's usually immaturity, is people who do get in people's faces. And um, I'm not exactly I'm not exactly like when people like interrupt somebody in the middle of a dinner. You know what I mean? Like I don't like that either. Like, and I know there are elected officials that really need to be held accountable for their actions, but I think there's a time and place for that.
yeah,
And
I,
I don't think it's in the middle of like, getting in their face while they're eating dinner in a restaurant. Um, but I do agree with maybe like a restaurant owner, somebody coming in and going, I'm really sorry, but I don't want to, um, based on your policies, I don't want your business. So I'm
yeah,
okay with that. Um, I'm okay with, in that aspect. But then, uh, yes and no. I guess I can't be because, that's kind of, I guess really I can't be okay with that because then that kind of goes against with what people fought for with, lunch counters and stuff like that. But, um,
Well, it happened to Goldman in the coffee shop in Park Slope. They returned his money and they kind of shamed him online. And I
yeah,
didn't, I didn't think that was the right thing to do either. And neither did Brad Lander, to his credit. He said
yeah,
he did not agree with that approach either. And so I think that we have to, yes, hold people accountable, but we have to just turn down the rhetoric in a lot of ways because political violence is much more common these days, and we have to. I don't think anybody should get hurt over this or, God forbid, killed or anything like that. I think we need to,
absolutely.
yeah.
So I attribute that instance is, a bunch of assholes and
Well,
not a
they
reflection of because I do remember at that same event there was some violence at there was some violence caused by some trans people, and one of the leaders of the rally that day got up front and made a public statement that, this was a few people that were angry and did something that they shouldn't. This does not reflect, how we feel. Because what would happen in the news is they would show trans people getting violent, and the whole message is lost as to why they were there in the first place. It's like the same thing with, like, when Black Lives Matter showed up and somebody focused on, an incident. And, now everybody's like, oh, Black Lives Matter. It's not like, they're rioting. Like, no, I've been to Black Lives Matter protests and they're very peaceful. It's what we tend to focus on these negative pockets of people.
Yeah, well, I think now that DSA has, elected several members of Congress at this point, I think part of leadership is condemning people whose ideological standpoint you might agree with, but maybe their tactics are unacceptable. And so I think that the the lady who, or the, I don't want to sound like a condescending man, but the woman who beat Diana DeGette in Denver, Milot Kiros, she would not. There was a violent anti-Semitic incident in her district within the last year or so, and she would not condemn it as such. And I think the reason why that happened is because there's a sense that, well, if I condemn that as anti-Semitic, then I'm kind of diluting my point about Israel Palestine. And I think those two things could exist at the same time. You can say that we should not condone anti-Semitism, especially violent anti-Semitism, but also continue to fight for the rights of Palestinians and to call the Israeli government out and to push for things like, policy-wise that you think would make a difference. I don't think those two things have to be mutually exclusive.
Well, she's not in office yet. I said this last week, I'm on the Whoopi Goldberg side of saying, let me see what they do. Because when we look at Mandani, like all of the, oh, he's going to do this and he's going to do that, and he did not attend the Israel Day march, and he got some flack for that, I think, because he did attend other marches. Um, but I do see him, supporting incidents in the city where that were anti-Semitic. So
Well, he's condemning all of that. Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
And because I don't conflate, you know, all Jews with every action that Israel takes. I know Israel's a Jewish state, but I don't blame
Neither do I.
I don't blame the average Jewish person for anything that Israel does, and I think it's counterproductive to view it that way.
With some people who are criticizing Mandami do,
Yeah,
and they kind of paint him with a very wide brush. So I'm saying don't, not you personally. I'm just
yeah.
saying that, um, but they have, and I don't think they should. But it's difficult. It's tough, and if we come out of it better on the other side, good. That's all. I mean, I'm
I
I'm
hope so.
hoping.
I think the position that we've always had on this show about that is that we want to see a peaceful two-state solutions where both sides can coexist and they have equal rights and one is not encroaching on the other and there's a peaceful living arrangement to both sides. And I think that uh, there's just so much that complicates that. But I just hope that the debate around it can be one that is uh, the debate is thoughtful and that it's deliberative and that is respectful to the way that people have come to their positions. Again, it's deeply entrenched in culture and religion and upbringing and background. I don't think you easily sway somebody. Like when somebody says to somebody who may be skeptical of Mamdani for that reason, like I don't think saying to them, well, listen to what he says about that, that's not going to do it. And so I think the one thing that's going to make a difference is just time. Just the reason why I say that is time will make a difference is because, as you said, let's see what they do. So I think Mamdani has governed like somebody who kind of just wants to fill the potholes and make sure that things are well funded and that we're safe. I think he's governed in a way that shows that he cares. And
But
so
he
I've
has to do that. That's
yeah.
governing.
Oh, I know, but
That's
we've
what
had
happens
but
when you become a politician. I always say the difference between being an activist and a politician are very different. Mandami was once an activist and now he's an elected official. He has to behave differently, especially if you're going to keep the office and if you're a decent human being, unlike our president, um, you have a compassion for humans and you want to do the right thing. You want to make sure that, you know, the city does well, the country does well.
oh yeah, well I think for the New Yorkers who have kind of come of age in the Bloomberg, de Blasio, and Adams era, to see somebody who actually genuinely cares is uh, refreshing because, Bloomberg had money, so he was able to bend rules like, the two-term limit. Um, we had de Blasio, who I don't think was ill-intentioned, but was definitely in over his head, not the best manager.
Yeah.
And then we had just a straight up criminal with Eric Adams. And so I think to see somebody who actually genuinely cares is refreshing. And I'm hoping that the people who are skeptical of him for whatever reason, um, I'm hoping that that shines through eventually and that the evidence before their eyes and ears overcomes any kind of misgivings they have.
Well, some of them have a big Islamophobe block of ice in front of them that we need to chip away. So it's going to take a while to thaw. That's just the reality of some people, not all people, but some people who are critical of him and some of the stuff that's said. And so I hope so. Bloomberg, interestingly enough, thought did care, but he's a wealthy man, and I feel sometimes wealthy people. I see this a lot with people who have money to give and want to give money. They know, as opposed to listening what people need, they're like, I know what people need, and I'm going to, you know what I mean? So I felt that that's how he kind of handled. Like, I do think there is a compassion there with Mayor Bloomberg,
I don't
but
know if that was compassion. I think it was just rich guy narcissism, because when to justify the extension of term limits, he said, well, the city is in an economic crisis, as is the whole rest of the country, and only I can fix it. That's why you should extend term limits. That was his whole.
and he let us vote for it, and we did.
Yeah,
So,
we did, but
so
interestingly enough, that election was predicted to be a blowout on his end, and it wasn't. It was much closer than even what he and his campaign people were anticipating. It was only maybe a 3 or 4 point difference between him and
yeah,
Trump at the
but we
time. And
voted for it. We voted
yeah,
for it, and then we voted him in. So we get what we vote for. I don't like Bloomberg for what he did for the Our jobs. He made my job horrible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He
And one of
was,
the main reasons why I left early.
yeah,
Mm. So, I'm not a Bloomberg fan, but I don't, I think he cared somewhat, unlike other wealthy people. So, anyhow, what else did we want to discuss here? The Supreme Court cases came out this week. What did you
yes.
think?
Well, I think it's quite scary because I'm talking about the birthright citizenship case. So, for our listeners, just to, as a recap, Donald Trump, upon re-entering office last year, one of his executive orders from day one was to redefine birthright citizenship in the United States. Now, birthright citizenship is pretty black and white according to the 14th Amendment. It clearly says that anybody born or naturalized in the United States is a citizen. And he challenges that. Of course, it was subject, excuse me, to court challenge. And the Supreme Court heard it earlier this year. I listened to the arguments at the time, and it was clear that the majority of justices were skeptical and that they were not going to rule in Trump's favor, at least here. The final count was 6-3 on this. So it was the three liberals, Kagan, Sotomayor, Jackson, and the Chief Justice, Roberts, who expressed the most skepticism during the
Right.
case,
Yeah.
um, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh. But Brett
Yeah.
Kavanaugh actually had a partial dissent uh, on that.
I
But
say
I
yes, but
yeah. And so he had a partial dissent. So it was 6-3. And that is a case that should be 9-0 because it's in the plain text of the Constitution. And these originalists who are on the Supreme Court and in the Federalist Society and basically conservative legal philosophy is, well, it's in the text. The text is just the text and nothing else. Well, yeah.
well, I will actually, Donald Trump made the argument that that was written for the fact because African Americans didn't have citizenship, and that was written in for them. And I was like, oh, that's a good argument. But my argument would be is that it says what you say, that the text is what it says, and the executive branch doesn't have the power to change that meaning. So I'm thinking that's where maybe the minority, didn't vote for it is, and where the majority did because of the fact of what the text says, and that if you want to make any changes, you have to change the Constitution the way you always change the Constitution, not by, President Trump saying so. So I
Yeah.
thought that was good. It kind of gave me faith that if we make change to the Constitution, we have to do it the old-fashioned way through the amendment process.
Yeah, well, also birthright citizenship has been, according to how it's defined by the 14th Amendment, that has been reaffirmed also through court precedent over and over and over again. And so there's a long legal history that supports the definition of birthright citizenship the way that we all know it to be, which is that anybody born or naturalized here is a citizen, period, end of story.
Which
Um,
I'm curious about the speech that Mandami's going to make about naturalized citizens. So on the 4th of July.
Yeah, and there was a few other decisions. One got rid of any remaining limits to campaign finance
Yeah,
and
that's not good.
contributions. No, and and their argument was essentially what it was in Citizens United. Money is a form of speech, and people can spend it how they want. They don't even have to attach their name to it.
Right. So we're going, yeah, so that's a loss for working people because that means more wealthy people can buy elections. And so that's exactly what that means. And so that was a loss for working people. And then the trans uh, playing sports that was
Yeah.
voted down.
Well, actually, the Supreme Court said that states can ban trans athletes. And so, again, I was making this point to somebody online today, and they were saying, they were crowing about states' rights. It was a MAGA person. They were crowing about states' rights. And, states' rights has been used throughout our history to do some pretty horrible things. Jim Crow, the people who were defending that said it was a state's right to do that. The voter suppression tactics that took place in the South, like literacy tests and poll taxes, the governors of those states used states' rights to justify that. And now they're using it to justify further oppressing, a minuscule percentage of the population. I mean, there's more laws written about trans athletes than there are trans athletes.
Yeah. I think in the case where that there was actually one trans athlete that they were questioning. So um but this is the crappy rallying cry for, the religious right conservative, groups in the United States. And it's unfortunate. I How many people are impacted because of this, But what
Zero, none.
Zero. But the thing is it's going to have residual effects down the road in regards to what message does this send to trans people. So that's where this is going to hurt.
Yeah, well, and I think that uh, AOC, because at the very beginning of this Trump term, around January of last year, February, Congress, the House passed a bill basically saying we want to ban trans athletes everywhere. And AOC made a really good point in that that bill had zero enforcement mechanism. So, in other words, how are you going to prove that somebody is trans or not trans to abide by any law that is passed? Are you going to permit, for parents out there, are you going to permit your children to maybe be subjected to genital checks?
Yeah.
Are you going to do all of that? I mean, we hear crowing about drag queens reading books all the time about protecting the children and the children this, the children that, and yet we see the most extreme versions of all of this. These are the same people who are in the Epstein files. They now want to check your child's genitals to see if they're trans or not, so they can compete in
That's
sports. Or that'll be as an excuse they use. Well, we have to see if they're trans, so then we can actually go ahead and maybe, God forbid, abuse them.
But it also it gives permission to me for treatment of trans people. Like I remember that boxer in the Olympics, that woman who won.
She wasn't
She
even
was
trans.
No, she wasn't, but she was from Turkey. I think Turkey, right?
Algeria. She was from Algeria.
Algeria. Algeria, okay, in the Mediterranean. And the comments and the scrutiny that poor woman had, and all she did was fight. Like, she was a boxer, she was a female boxer. And, her build was, she's a boxer, she lifts weights. Like, have you seen women weightlifters? Their bodies are quite different, so
Yeah.
but the negative comments that went on and the scrutiny that poor woman went through, I thought was sad. And that's what I'm afraid about this ruling, is that's what it's going to do to some people.
Well, yeah, and in that case, this woman was not trans. In fact, the government of Algeria had to put out pictures of her when she was a little girl to prove that she wasn't trans. And it's actually illegal to be trans in Algeria. So it was totally at odds with with the facts and with the actual experiences of the people involved.
Yeah. So, and this just is just going to give permission for ridiculousness
Well,
to
my
happen.
concern, well, and there's another case I want to come back to, but this actually ties into another LGBT themed story. I believe that this whole going after trans athletes and trans this and trans that and deciding, that this book is inappropriate and drag queens and blah, blah, blah. I think that that is just an entry point to get to gay people. Honestly, I think trans people are kind of the gateway drug for them to
They're
get to.
easy to go after now.
Yeah, that's the entry point that they're going to attack all of us in. And I've seen a lot of gay
See that?
people, and I've seen a lot of, gay people, unfortunately, these self-hating MAGA gays, demonize trans people and try to exclude them from our community. See my shirt, I am a gaytriot. And so we should be welcoming to trans people, to these privileged white MAGA gays. We have to remember it was a trans woman by the name of Marsha P. Johnson who led the Stonewall riots, that eventually led to our liberation and led to all of the rights we now enjoy that are very much in jeopardy right now. And so uh, I think this is just a gateway to get to gay people. They are furious that gay people have the right to marry. They are furious that gay people have equal employment opportunities. They are furious that gay people can live life on their own terms. And that's what Pride is about. That's why we celebrate Pride. And I think this is just a way for them to do it. The Supreme Court has aided and abetted them in doing it. And actually, this was the story I was getting to. Pete Buttigieg, uh, who is, probably the most successful modern gay presidential candidate. He won the Iowa caucus in 2020. Um, he is probably going to run again, I would imagine, in 28. And he was doxxed, and I don't mean doxxed in the traditional way. When somebody is doxxed, oftentimes their information is put out into the public, and there's somebody swats them, like they call in the SWAT team to that person's house just to, fuck with them. Uh, what this did was he and his husband Chasten were separated from their children for part of the night because it was based on an anonymous tip. They live in Michigan now, and it was an anonymous tip that they posed a danger to their children. And so their children were put who knows where in police custody for 4 hours, and they were questioned for hours about this.
Wait, I'm confused. So the police took their children and then
Yes,
questioned them because why?
there was an anonymous tip called into their
About what?
CPS line that just saying, I don't know the specifics of what they claimed the danger was, but they said that
Like an abuse on the children?
yes, yes, and which
Yeah,
is
that does happen. That happens. Children do that sometimes to their parents. And like, I'm mad at my parents, so I'm going to call up and say
oh
they,
oh no, these kids are too young. They're like 4 years old. They can't do that.
so
Um, and so somebody did this. This was and Pete Buttigieg and his husband have since said that this was they believe this to be politically motivated.
it's
But
horrible.
that's how imagine how traumatizing it is. Those kids are maybe 3, 4 years
Yeah.
old, and to be
Yeah.
taken away from the only parents they know, to be put in some room for 4 hours over bullshit allegations made by some Karen or some redneck hillbilly about them.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. So, and also the trauma of the parents of,
Yes.
if that's
And
frightening. Like, if that's frightening, like they might take my kids away. For what reason? No reason.
this was a my belief is that this was a homophobic attack. This was an attack. There's no way it's not a physical attack, but it's an attack nonetheless. It's an attack on somebody's family, on somebody's home, on somebody's domestic life, on the experience of the children. That is absolutely abhorrent and despicable. And so when the Supreme Court makes decisions like this about trans athletes, a solution in search of a problem for the specific purpose of trying to take away gay rights eventually. That is the kind of trauma and that is the kind of violence, because I do believe it's an act of violence, not physical, but it is violent to want to do that to somebody. They inflict that on people.
Yeah, that's horrible. So, um, well, so is that why Pete moved to Michigan? Like
No,
because
he's been in Michigan for a while. He's been in Michigan for a while. It was the Michigan State CPS that was called on him. He's been in
okay,
Michigan for maybe 3 or 4 years at this point, but that it was the Michigan State CPS that was called on him. And for gay parents everywhere, that is their worst nightmare.
that's
And
a
actually, I
scary thing.
knew Yeah, I knew a set of gay parents here in New York where, you know, gay adoption wasn't very common when they adopted their child, and they were actually stopped along the highway because they thought that the child was kidnapped. And so
Scary.
this is a really common thing. And unfortunately, when we see these laws and decisions being handed down, it makes the permission structure to go after people like that much more broad.
I think about just other groups as well who like, when I think of mixed race couples, um like initially like in the 60s, people being taken away like, in regards to like the Loving case. Um because there are certain people in this country that believe that we have to behave in a certain way or be with a certain person. And then if anybody is out of that box, um, it's wrong. And so therefore those people who are going about their daily lives, like, people who immigrate to this country and who are going about their daily lives making a living are ripped, from their families, because there are people that are angry over what? Hate? Like Pete, was separated. Like we think of like the Loving couple who were separated, and we think about many immigrants say that are separated. For what reason? They're law-abiding citizens, and they're doing what they need to do, and be productive in this country. And we put more people in power that don't have the hate. If we look at those two climbers from yesterday, do you see those two climbers?
Oh yeah, well
Oh
I
yeah, of
actually
course you did. You made the batter. That's right. That's a
yeah,
great batter.
I
So
put our logo on it. I was like I had to join in the trend. I have to do this for us. Yeah.
yeah, that was great. That was great. So for the listeners, I'm sure you heard that there was two climbers that climbed on top of the Empire State Building and posted a flag about when love is more powerful than power, loving power, then we'll have peace in this world. And then they apparently proposed to each other, and then they were arrested and they were released today. They're like a stunt couple. They've done this stuff before.
Oh,
Um,
I was like throwing up just looking at that what their vantage point must have been because I hate heights and I was just like, ugh,
yeah,
ugh.
yeah, I was too. I was like, and then I think about the police officers who had to go up there and arrest them. It's
Yeah.
like I want to like be in the room, like, all right, who's going up? So,
Yeah.
like how much overtime are you paying? Like, I don't know, like who like is there like a force that the people who have to climb buildings are part of the police department? Because that
That
was
makes me
crazy, like where they had to go to go get them, and
Well,
say
that
you're
makes,
undoing.
yeah. The one incident that I could see that's comparable to this is going back a long ways was Philip Petit, who was the guy who had the tightrope between the Twin Towers when they were there.
Yeah,
That was insane. I watched the documentary about that, and I was like, you have to be fucking out of your mind to do some shit like that. I just, ugh.
yeah, no, yeah. So I'm looking at a condos and I don't want to go above the fourth floor. So
I'm on the fourth floor, so yeah.
yeah, people are like, "Oh, you should go up higher." And I'm like, "No, it's okay. I think I like the fourth floor." So I think
Yeah.
it's stairs. I could take the stairs. So,
I love that the climbers from yesterday though are a meme. I love, me, I love a good meme. And so I was like, oh, I have to promote the podcast in some way by using this. And so it was
that was a
so
great
I
name.
yeah. And so that was good. I want to just come back because there was another Supreme Court decision I wanted to. This was from a few days ago, and this is actually a little bit of a good bit of good news. We have
Well, the
the
birthright citizen was a good news.
No, it is good news, but I just felt, number one, I part of the reason why I'm still a little bit dour about that is because Number one, it should have been 9-0. The text of
Okay.
this text. And also it takes, one Chief Justice Roberts, let's say, to step down, and then a lunatic is appointed to that chair. And then, and that changes the outcome of a decision like that. And um, so that gets me a little bit wary, even though it was overall a positive outcome.
I
Uh,
was just glad that it passed. So,
yeah. And the one piece of really good news is that Donald Trump has to pay E. Jean Carroll $5 million.
gee, yes, that's good news. But for someone who sued uh m- for money, and I still have not seen a dime of that money, you need to get someone to enforce that. So, how are they enforcing that? Is that because the Supreme Court said so? But who enforces it? The
I
executive
think
branch?
well, no, I think her lawyer has already filed a motion to do exactly
They now
that.
like put a lien on his property or something like that?
Well, they could garnish maybe some of those 2 billion in crypto wages that he's got,
That's right. Yeah,
or
we got to talk about that.
yeah, he's good,
That
or
man made more money this year than he has in his career. Like if like
well,
he's
yeah. I always thought,
downright profiting from this being in this administration and his
oh
family.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's always been the reason he's wanted to keep his taxes hidden. He's never, at least up until recently, he's never been as
Because
rich
he's
as
a
he said.
crook.
No,
He's a
he's just
crook. He
now
cheats.
he is. Yeah, but I mean, for many years, even before in his pre-candidate life, he's always wanted to keep his taxes secret because he was never as rich as he always said. I think now he is because he's grifted off the presidency with crypto, with all these other side ventures and things like that. But he's going to have to pay some of that to E. Jean Carroll. And
Well,
just
good.
for, and just for our listeners, uh, Donald Trump, it was determined by a civil jury a few years ago that Donald Trump sexually abused E. Jean Carroll, and then proceeded to defame and lie about her. And she won a civil judgment of $5 million against him. There's a second E. Jean Carroll case that's still pending because he appealed that as well, because he defamed her as well a second time after that.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was an even bigger judgment. That was an $85 million judgment. And here's the deal with that. The defense for it is unbelievable because in 2019, this is when he made the comments that E. Jean Carroll said defamed her. And his argument was, well, it was at least his lawyers filed in court that his part of his official duties and official capacity as president was to defame E. Jean Carroll and say that she was lying and that she's this and that. That was part of his duty.
Seriously? Oh
Yes,
my
that was in his lawyers filed that. His lawyers said
God.
that that was part of his official duties as the president of the United States at the time was to defame E. Jean Carroll.
You know, this president does try. He throws so much spaghetti against the wall to see what will stick. And some of it's ridiculous, and some of it
Well,
sticks. And
I'm hoping that that one works out. I'm hoping that the Supreme Court doesn't say, well, we gave him immunity. So, yeah, he was doing his job when he called you a liar. So,
but all right, well, I'm glad she's going to get this money, and he's going to because at the end of the day, Donald Trump's not allowed to lose. So the fact that he will lose is just going to get his goat even more. It's just
oh,
going to get
yeah.
his
And so
even more,
her lawyers have
which
filed, yeah, her lawyers have filed a motion to get like some enforcement the way you were talking about earlier. So uh, she's asking a judge to appoint somebody to make sure that that happens.
get like a marshal to come and make sure that happens. Well, because he can't lose, and because he can't lose, Cash Patel is, trying to get his get out of jail, keep free card, and not get out of jail, but keep him in
Oh,
the game
he's trying to keep his
card
job.
by keep his job by getting some FBI agents to look into the Georgia 2020 election. I'm just kind of like, really? I hope they're so embarrassed by what they don't find. My only
Well,
worry is that they're going to plant things. That's my
my
concern.
that's my worry too. And just as a review for our listeners, there were several hand counts in Georgia. There were hand recounts in Georgia. Um, it was the subject of many different court challenges. And actually, when there was a group in Arizona looking to do the same thing, it was called the Cyber Ninjas, who was looking to relitigate Arizona's election in 2020. They actually found not only was there not fraud significant to affect the outcome, but Joe Biden's outcome grew even more so. And so I'm hoping that this is just kind of a ploy to do this to for Cash to keep his job. Cash has been on thin ice, according to well-documented reporting from months now. And so I think this is just his plea to do this.
As
This
far
is
as
what, well, this is what Tulsi Gabbard did too. Tulsi Gabbard
Yeah, but
was
what
on.
happened to all the stuff that she confiscated? Like, where is that? What are they going to go through those things? Is that what they're
She probably,
doing? Because, she wouldn't confiscate all this stuff.
well, she probably brought it with her to her yoga retreat in Hawaii. Um, and she I think this is again,
Is that
Tulsi
where
was
she
on.
went?
Yeah, that's where she's from. She went back to Hawaii. So um and so I think that this is just a ploy by Cash to keep his job. I think that was the play for Tulsi too. She was on thin ice for a long time too. She was very much in disagreement with most of the administration about Iran and other foreign interventions. And so
Well, they're not going to play.
yeah, she was doing it as a way to kind of ingratiate herself with Trump too. And he's been on thin ice since he was drinking beer with the team in Italy.
All right. Well, he's not going to find anything, and he's he's probably going to lose his job anyway. So, it's just a
Yeah,
matter of
he's
days.
probably
They should
he,
make that. What is that betting site, Kalshi? Is
yeah.
What if there's a bet for how long I'm sure there is. How long he's going to last?
Don Jr. is on the board of that company, so he
Um,
probably
I'm
has
I'm sure
inside
they've all
knowledge.
betted on. They probably would bet on it and then go, "All right, Dad, I bet on this. Fire him so I can make some
Yeah,
money."
yeah.
Honestly. Hmm. We will
Insider
see.
trading,
So anyhow,
insider trading by fiat.
well, I thinking like if you just want to wrap this up by just thinking about, when we post this, it'll be the nation's 250th uh anniversary. So, any thoughts about the country on 250th?
Well, initially I was kind of like, I've been saying this to people a lot, like, if been quoting my mother when I was younger and when I was bad or when I did something wrong. And she's like, well, I don't think you deserve a party this year. And so, so I've been quoting my mom, like saying that about, the United States. Well, I don't think the United States deserves a party this year. And so, but initially I was thinking about it in those terms, but also just I was thinking about it, oh, it feels more like a funeral. But but then I kind of rethought it and I kind of reframed the question of, what does America mean to me and what I'm fighting for all the time on this podcast and other work that I do. And to me, it's celebrating the uh, going back to that part in the Constitution, in order to form a more perfect union, we're always trying to form a more perfect union. And so that's what I aim to try and do. And there's certainly a lot in our history to be proud of. There's certainly a lot that, we have to answer for and relitigate. But I'm trying to cast a more hopeful light on, what the future brings. I think that's something that we ought to do. And I also think we shouldn't let MAGA own the flag and own the colors and own the red, white, and blue. This is our country too.
Yes, absolutely.
How were you thinking
So,
about that?
um, so I think of the Declaration of Independence, and I think about, hold on, I'm just bringing up,
Which
sorry.
part? The consent
Um,
of the governed?
no, hold on, I'm just looking for, here we go. Look, I hit on here's a lesson, never hit on the first link, um, because, it's never, but, I think about the Declaration of Independence when I used to teach it, and then they had people read the Declaration of Independence. And there's something, and I remember because, Morgan Freeman introduces it, and he's just like, Godfather voice, he's God. Um, and they talk about that this country's constant struggle back and forth um, to hold this nation up to its ideals, because the Declaration of Independence is a great example of what our ideals are. But we're also reminded, especially when that was written and in all the parts of history, and of, we haven't lived up to those ideals, but we're constantly putting ourselves in the mirror and saying, look, this is who we are. And that's what I really love about this country is that we and that's what I really love about that document. It constantly reminds us to keep holding ourselves accountable. And when you go to that church in Barcelona that's constantly being built, it's never finished. The La Familia, I'm saying it like an Italian. And I think with this nation is because of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The Declaration allows us to hold us up to our ideals, and the Constitution allows the stability for us to govern. I think the Constitution is one of the greatest documents ever written. Um, and I'm proud of that. And, and I think,
Uh-oh, you cut out, Nance. Well, on that note, this is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage, and we'll see you next week.